Very much like my colleague, I'm still trying to wrap my head to around, why so many states are owing. We do know that for states to make money, you must have the requisite infrastructure. Do you think that they could have been in the process of building these infrastructure, perhaps on some projected revenue that, maybe all of a sudden for them just stopped?
Yes, a lot of them expected especially the money from the federal government to either remain or increase. Oil prices were very high. The federal government had more money, more allocation for the states, and in the past few years, everything has basically dried up. It's just 50%, roughly 50% of what they used to have before. So a lot of them planned on that basis. Oh, federal government will be giving us over 2 or 5 billion, 10 billion naira per month. We'll do this thing or pay salaries. We were left with 2 or 3 billion. And if that has been halved, if that is now half, they're in big trouble, because whatever federal government is allocated, the banks will take it from source. So they have no choice. The contractors themselves have agreements with the state government that they will take their money from source. So once the federal government throws the money to their banks, the banks disperse it out to the creditors. So the state government has no choice but to pay debts, and we're left with just peanuts.
Let's look at monies within states. If maybe state A decides to have a function or to receive maybe some sportsmen, and you decide to say the state governor has disbursed or like a cash gift, where do such monies come from? Because we're trying to look at how some of these monies are spent. I still just don't want to believe that deliberately maybe anyone would want to owe anyone that amount of monies. I mean, people are being owed as much as 9 months and you're leaving. Let's look at it. Elections just went by now in the country. Some other persons would think that when we try to, get funds to drive elections, shouldn't we now be asking questions where such monies come from? Do we maybe do they estates dip their hands into what should have gone for payment of salaries, or they get monies from maybe their personal salary account?
Yes, there should be more questions being asked. But for instance, why is the civil service in some states quite bloated? Why do we have people being hired for a state that is perpetually dependent on the federal government for a monthly allocation? For instance, why is there no, though it's not politically, smart, why are there no retrenchments? Why is there no halt in hiring? So we shouldn't just feel that state government are just there to pay a bloated civil service. There needs to be some sort of, there really has to be some sort of attention towards capital expenditure, and do the state governors have the guts, the courage to basically, reduce the staff in the civil service? Many of them don't. The best you can get is maybe a halt or suspension in hiring. So there's this attrition. People just get old and retire, and then it's just a slow down in the process of bringing people in. But it has to be a comprehensive way. There has to be a attention away from just paying salaries. Bloated civil service has to be reduced. There also has to be a focus on how debts or loans are utilized in the state to generate more revenue for the state, and and in many ways ensure that the state is more solvent. Does this solvency ratio that has to basically ensure that it fits in each state. So yeah, a lot of it, I would say Lagos State is a big example. I go back to Lagos State. It's tremendously in debt, but it's making tremendous amount of money. Lagos State is almost quite sufficient in its revenue generation. So you get in debt, you put that money to generate more money, and it just keeps going. Your economy is bigger, you're taxing more people, and it makes you a little bit more, comfortable with this crisis going on.
How do you see state government resolving this? It looks like it's going to be a difficult one for a lot of them. We already have that labor unions are angry, rightly so. Yep. And they're calling strikes or calling for strikes.
The same, yeah.
Does it help? And how do you see them being able to resolve this?
The same labor union five years ago, 2010, pushed the federal government for an increase in salary. This is part of the mess we're in right now. Salaries were increased by 53% around 2010. So the federal government had more, more money to pay for this recurrent expenditures, pay for salaries. So there's this huge, burden, financial burden towards paying salaries, especially on the federal level, which the states will also have to replicate. So that's a big challenge from the union, that they ensure that salaries are increased. Secondly, regarding the issue of where to resolve the problem, the president has to intervene. There's no other way. There's, I don't see revenues being generated, oil prices changing anytime soon.
Do you think this should be a permanent intervention? Because if it does it, how long is it going to do that?
Well, definitely not a permanent intervention. There needs to be some way of just basically, ensuring that there's a clean slate and they can move on with conditions, maybe streamlining the civil service and also not taking more debts. I think federal government has stopped them from taking debts, taking loans from banks. That is also well. So those conditions, pay them off, and they put tough conditions on them. Something like it's happening in Greece or something like that.
Yeah, we talked about truthfulness. One of the things is that you must be able to face up with your employees and tell them what the true situations of things are. Do you see state governments doing that?
Oh, they are. I mean, you have no choice.
So
you're not paying salary for 3 months or 12 months or 7 months, whatever. There must be some sort of explanation. I think many times the union are quite considerate. There's no mass strikes going on. We just a few places, some universities, some civil servants, some certain areas of the civil service are on strike. But it's not like a total shutdown. Some people are getting paid. Some people are only getting paid allowances and things like that. So I'm sure there's some sort of understanding of the situation is. But it's still not good enough when you need salary to take care of your family and take care of yourself and plan. So, yeah.
What is the long-term implication on this? Because it looks like it's just happening in government circles, but we all know how the private sector too depends somewhat on government. How do you see this affecting the private sector?
It would hurt them. The private sector depends on the government for a lot of their businesses, especially in helping them for infrastructure development, helping them for for contracts. Basically, a lot of the contractors don't have the money to execute contracts. They will go to the banks to get those loans. If the banks don't see the state government as a very solvent or very dependable partner, they will not give out those loans to the contractors. Even if the states may not even give out the loans to the contractors themselves. So it all intertwines. It all affects each other. And it's important to note the fact that even banks right now are not paying for these oil marketers. So that's a problem we're seeing right now. So a lot of it is banks and government quietly intertwined with these challenges we're facing through.
But if you look through some of these states, the budget that they've had over time, they always give this impression. I mean, you see recurrent expenditure usually higher than capital expenditure, yet they're grappling with this kind of challenge. So one wonders, is it that the budgetary provisions are just mainly for the books, but in reality it's completely different?
It is quite different. It's quite separate. They look at the budget is really just for...
But that shouldn't be the case.
It shouldn't. And there has to be some change in thinking. There has to be some real paradigm shift here, where state governments are just there to just, many states are just there to pay salaries. Pay salaries, pay school, pay education cost, pay health services, and there's really not much left. So they now resort to taking out bonds, now taking out loans, to sustain that.
Do you see this being overcome? Because I think late last year, early this year, when I checked, it was I counted about 24 states, but now we're talking about 18. So do you think that some of them would have said, okay, well, look, we need to sort this out here. This is really embarrassing, and as such, they'll come to grips with what the reality is and then sort it out? Yeah,
they will, but I'm pretty sure a lot of them spent a lot because of the elections, a very competitive election in Nigerian history. So a lot of them, went into huge spending for, to ensure that the electorate finds them rather pleasing.
Yeah, but how do you explain those states are owing for above 9 months? Have they been doing elections for 9 months?
Well,
what have they been doing?
No, they have not, obviously, but they've been leading up to the election. There's also been, they expected the federal government to be giving them the same amount of money. With the oil prices falling, they will find themselves in that huge bind. So it's a catch-22 situation. Yeah.
All right, thank you for coming on today. Demola Oshodi is a policy consultant on governance. We'll return in just a moment. Please stay with us.